again to my channel, and today I want to discuss about DHCP server, Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. And before I'm forward, I will introduce myself first. I'm Tony and I'm network engineer. And okay, before we forward about this chapter, can we to like, comment, share, and subscribe as well. Okay. And for this chapter, we will discuss about Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, or DHCP server. Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol is protocol network that possible make device network to define configuration IP address to user that need it. This configuration IP address, this is input IP address itself, and then subnet mask and default gateway and DNS server that needed to access the internet. And the phase that will define IP address configuration called DHCP server. You can build DHCP server with use router Mikrotik, whereas computer that will ask IP address at the DHCP server called DHCP client. This implementation DHCP to make you not be bothered again to configure IP address its computer user. DHCP many implement at the hotspot used for private or hotspot to public. You can imagine how busy your if must give information IP address even there are people that want use your hotspot. Furthermore, more user that come is people that doesn't understand at all how about IP address itself. Okay, and for the next we will forward about basic configuration. The scenario that we will use is scenario that we used earlier, like at the picture 5.1. At that picture, you can look if there are couple computer that need the IP address from the server, and computer lain that need the IP address. This is connect with Ether 2 from the router Mikrotik. So if you want to activate the DHCP server, so DHCP server must active at your router at the router Ether 2. And beside of that, you must understand any option that you must configure at the DHCP server. Those options can I explain as follow. Point number 1, network address. This option is network address with prefix is subnet mask that must give to user computer. In this scenario, network address is 10.10.10.0/24. And point number 2, this is gateway. Certainly user computer must have gateway that will use access internet. In this scenario, gateway is IP address Ether 2 from router Mikrotik IP address 10.10.10.1. And for the next, the last is IP address pool. This option determine how many total IP address that will you give to couple user computer. In this scenario, total IP address that will give is 10.10.10.2 until IP 10.10.10.5. You can adjust with network that you build. And for the next, DNS server. Certainly, computer client will access internet that need DNS server. In this scenario, that become DNS server is router Mikrotik with IP 10.10.10.1. And the last option is free system. DHCP server work with principle run IP address. User computer will run IP address configuration at the DHCP server. In this run process, DHCP server will give spare time run IP address that the set by option list time. As long as list time from IP address is not finished yet, so that IP address will not run to other computer B server. Even though computer user that run first time not use that IP address anymore. Don't configure list time too long if your network usage is very dynamic. For the example, if computer user just use network as long as less than 2 hours, In this scenario, release time will configure as long as 30 minutes. To configure DHCP server at the interface Ether to router Mikrotik, you can do through wizard that available. The first command that you use just IP DHCP -server. Setup like this capture, okay? And result DHCP configuration, you can look with user command like this. If when configure DHCP server, use Winbox, so you can do through menu IP and then DHCP server and then button DHCP setup. Okay, for the next you will look IP address just view that run to computer user already. Command that you use are like this. Whereas if when look how many IP address that run already through Winbox, you can do through menu IP and then DHCP server and then tab lists. Okay. Okay, and for the next we will discuss static mapping. Implementation DHCP server possible if each computer's user will getting different IP address every request run to the server. But DHCP server possible renting specific IP address to specific computer based of MAC address from that computer user. So that IP address no more released to other computer user. For the example, if computer user has MAC address 00.1e.68.55.a9.dx and you want make allocation IP address with IP address 10.10.10.2 at that computer, so command that you can use are like this. Okay. If you use Winbox, you can do through menu IP and then DHCP server and then menu resist and then add like this capture. And if you lazy to insert MAC address one by one to make static IP address, command like the command before. So you can wait until computer user do run IP address like usual. After that computer user getting IP address, so you directly can make static IP with MAC address that computer. To do make static IP like that, you must use Winbox through menu IP and then DHCP server and then menu resist and then select line that you want. Then click twice and select make static like this capture. And for the next we will discuss about safety use DHCP server. Even though you server DHCP server already and limiting user IP address from IP 10.10.10.0 until 10.10.10.5, but your network user possible to bother and use configuration IP address that they make self. It's not that if they know already that your network address is 10.10.10.0/24 with gateway 10.10.10.1 and DNS server 10.10.1. User computer that intend to bother possible to configure IP address 10.10.10.12. This will make you hard to monitor your network with little additional configuration, so you can force network user to use DHCP server. If their computer user does try to configure IP address with static IP, so that user will not connect to Mikrotik router, even though they use IP address 10.10.10.2 until 10.10.10.5. Okay, so the configuration that you need to do are like this. You can do through menu IP and then tap DHCP server and then select DHCP server name that you made already. For instance, DHCP1 like this capture. For the next forward configuration at the interface Ether2 with use command like this. Okay. That command you can do with use Winbox through menu interface and then tap Ethernet, select Ether2 like at this capture. Okay, and for the next we will discuss about DHCP client. Internet Service Provider or ISP certainly also implementing DHCP to their customer, especially personal customer, with implementing IP address as dynamic to their customer, so ISP can save user IP address if their customer that's still in offline condition, so IP address can use by another customer. This also make AC customer not tricky as their IP address to ISP administrator. If this technique you implement, so you can again configure IP address as manual or static at interface ether 1. You must make that interface ether 1 getting IP address, gateway and DNS server as automatic from ISP router. You can look example topology at this picture, okay? And at this scenario, router ISP will behave as DHCP server, whereas interface ether 1 from Mikrotik router will behave as the DHCP client. This is because ether 1 will do run IP address to router ISP. Command that you can use for make ether 1 as DHCP server are like this, okay? If you use Winbox, you can do through menu IP and then DHCP client and then button add like at this capture. Okay, and for the next you must check again what interface ether 1 have getting IP address with automatic from router ISP. Command that you can use are like this. Okay, result captured that IP address showing that IP address 118.10.10.14 or LAN with index 1 getting with dynamic mark with label D at the front that IP address. You also must check what already getting the default gateway and DNS server through DHCP from ISP or not. You can check with command like this, okay? You can pay attention if gateway that give by ISP are 118.10.10.1 also with DNS server. Pay attention with carefully if gateway configuration that we got are dynamic configuration marked with label D at the LAN with index 0. And yeah, okay, actually I'm already finished explain about DHCP server in this chapter, so I hope you enjoy about my video and getting benefit from my video, and don't forget to like, comment and share about my video so my video and my channel will evolve and I will can get with you about anything else about IT field, okay? Okay, see you at the next my video.
Hello everyone, if you are new at my channel, don't forget to like, comment, share, tag and subscribe. Okay, thanks.